Senator Cassidy.
I agree with what the chair said. There's a lot of things to talk about here. But let me kind of go to you, Mr. Walker, and I think also you, Mr. Sobrino Vega. You mentioned the desire for resilience and for 30% renewables. Now, when we took our tour of Puerto Rico, there was lots of smashed windmills, and our tour of U.S. Virgin Islands, a lot of smashed solar panels. So I'm guessing that if you're going to be resilient, there has to be at least some redundancy in terms of, yes, we have renewables, but there has to be a amount of backup generation as either base load and or reserve generation. Is that correct?
Senator, when I spoke earlier, I spoke about the integration of renewables as part of the strategy. I did not indicate any percentage like an RPS.
That may be you, sir.
But that being said, the question you asked is a good one because I too saw the havoc that was wrought during Hurricane Maria and the impact it had on renewables. To that end, part of the modeling effort we are undertaking is the utilization of our expertise with weather data, particularly wind, to identify where there are opportunities strategically to place things like solar and wind that we saw damaged in Puerto Rico, utilizing the topography of the island to facilitate its ability to withstand hurricanes. So
presumably, though, that it will always be more vulnerable than other assets. And sir, you were going to comment?
Yes. Resiliency requires redundancy in generation capacity on the island. That's a given. But the introduction of renewable energy sources is not the way it's structured in our renewable portfolio standard that was legislated and then back in 2010 and amended subsequently, is to provide a cheaper source of energy that can allow that the energy sector and the cost of producing energy on the island is lower if we only depended on diesel and petroleum products.
I accept that. So there would be redundancy, if you will, for resiliency, but nonetheless, net, you would have a lower price. I think
that is the goal, sir, yes.
So let me ask, the other thing we learned, and Mr. Higgins put it very nicely, the generation is not co-located with your consumption. So I recall that coal-powered power plant on one side of the island, but it's the opposite side than San Juan. Now, that seems as if you're going to address that. You're actually going to put some of this redundant, necessary for resiliency capacity on the northern side of the, or excuse me, on the opposite side of the island from the coal-fired plant. I presume that plan is in the works?
Yes, sir. One of the important initiatives that we are undertaking is to look at possibly and hopefully repowering some of the northern generation, both bringing the maintenance up to standards and repowering it with a hopefully liquefied natural gas imported and then burned in the generators.
Now, we saw that. Now, going back to the former regime, I remember being struck at that plant outside San Juan. It was rusted. I mean, it was just amazing how lousy the maintenance had been of that plant. But there were two, I think GE looked like jet engines sitting there generating electricity. So do you anticipate this sort of LNG associated with these sorts of engines on multiple places around the island so it can back up these microgrids and the 30% renewable?
Senator, for the first round, we're thinking of perhaps a small, not a massive LNG solution for the two jet engine installations that you talked about, so that instead of being fired by oil, they'd be fired by natural gas.
I thought those were being fired by natural gas. Do I remember that incorrectly?
They are not fired by natural gas today, the ones at the San Juan generating station that you allude to. I also think it's very fair to say that we are not proud of the maintenance condition of our fleet, whether it's the generating fleet or our transmission grid. That needs to be maintained better, and our future budgets call for that.
Now, so, but, and lastly, but to my point, it seems, when we flew there, it seemed as if, again, you have this island way over here that was one of the last places to have its island restored. As we flew over, that was dark and other things were lit. And then you have like the mountains separating 3 or 4 different places. You know exactly what I am stumbling and fumbling to try and describe. Again, would you put that sort of 2-jet engine sort of pack in each of those places? Or are we again going to have all these lines stretching over the mountains being vulnerable to a big storm?
Senator, what we're going to try to do through the integrated resource planning process that Chair Roman has addressed, that Mr. Sobrino has also addressed, that Mr. Walker's addressed. Integrated resource planning is a modern, highly developed methodology for determining what the right mix of resources and grid improvements and technology should be to best meet the island's energy needs. It's clear that we're not meeting them very well today. Therefore, the integrated resource plan should identify the very kinds of things you're identifying. Where does the generation need to be? What kind of generation would make the most sense? Meeting all the goals, whether environmental or cost.
So let me stop you, because I'm out of time. But I will say that I guess one more question I would have asked, and I'll ask for the record. We've just spent all this money rebuilding, but it looks as if going forward we may redistribute. And so knowing that maybe that's how it had to be done, it does seem as if there is an inefficiency in resource allocation. And again, maybe it had to be done that way, but it does seem as if you are going to relocate from your testimony. I yield back. I'm sorry for going over, Madam Chair.